Welcome back to Talk Solent, the chat show where we share our local views of news catching RI. With us today is Kevin Dye, a parish councillor from Shedfield, and Stef Nienaltowski, a parish councillor from Denmead. Now, handbags at dawn, I'm sure it won't be, over which parish is best. We won't start with that, no, but we will come back to parishes very shortly. But first of all, Kevin, now, sadly and unfortunately, people die, and everyone dies. It's not like some people live and some people die. But recently, there have been a few people who've died and not left wills. What difficulty does that cause?
Well, it can cause incredible difficulty, really, when you think about families who are grieving through the loss of a relative. But as I say, it can be very, very expensive. Expense that people could very much avoid by the simple thing of making a will, you know. And
what can be? How can it be expensive if you've got no will? What problems?
If there's no will, passing the assets on can be a lot more difficult, and without going into great technical detail, you have to apply for letters of administration instead of probate, and it can be really, really difficult, and especially if there's more than one family member. So there's no one executor. Or a couple of executors that you might appoint in your will, Shan.
I've done my will.
Well, good
it does need changing, I have to say.
Does it really?
But I do have one.
I'll give you my card afterwards.
Okay.
But yeah, so changes that need to be made. And in that situation you described there, it's almost worse if you've got an elderly will, a will that's too old and was written sort of many, many years ago. And there's several famous people who died. Peter Cook was one of them. Who made a will on a piece of paper in pencil, and it was found to be wholly inadequate, and you know, the relatives struggled to sort things out afterwards, and that's the real issue, really. You know, do you want your assets to be treated in such a way? Well, if you do, express it by way of a will.
But it doesn't. You don't have to go to lawyers. So obviously, it's better because if you don't know what you're doing. The interesting thing when I wrote mine. Was the lawyer who did it said to me, why did you get us to do it? He said, because everything you've written in your instructions, you could have done it yourself from the ones that you can buy and then get someone to just check it for you. And the reason that was because my mum used to write wills. In the old days when you physically had to type things, was her. She was a legal secretary at one time, and I, who was about 9 or 10, and I used to sit with the other copy, reading word for word. So because you didn't even have carbon paper on those wills in those days. So I know.
Well, you can still go to a certain retailer now and spend £3.50 to buy one and fill in the gaps.
Yes.
Will it stand the test of time? That's the question.
Well, maybe not.
Yeah, they do. I think the other point I'd like to make is we used to come from a very nuclear family structure in this country and other countries, but you know, talk about this country now. And of course, we are now so much more differently structured. People don't get married. People do get married and do divorce, sadly, and then remarry or don't remarry. So if the old nuclear family triangle, you know, of sort of, you know, husband to wife to children is very different these days, and it's more complex. Personally, I used an internet service. The guarantees that came with it, you know, I read and reread, and then I looked up again and checked them out. So for me, it was relatively inexpensive, and I got someone to check it. It's now housed with 2 other members of my wider family, and I've signed a letter to say what it was. But we do look at it every year, and just make sure that each year it's still relevant to the assets.
You've done one thing right there, Steph.
Yeah.
You've got one.
Yes, indeed. Yes,
a good start.
Yes.
What would you say? I mean, it probably all depends on everybody's circumstances and how they change. I mean, I had written in some, some, in my opinion, some fail-safe, so if my brother had more than one child and stuff, which he did. So things like that.
Yes.
But it does now need changing. But how often would you reckon that people should look at it and get it?
Well, I think this once-a-year idea of Steph's is pretty good, actually, but it's what you consider when you do look at it. I mean, you can either make your will, put it in the bottom drawer and forget about it forever, which is probably not a good thing to do, because there are life changes. People get divorced, people pass away, they're not going to be able to help you as an executor and this kind of stuff. So really, when there's a life-changing event in your family, that's when you should consider, does it call for a rewrite?
But you're talking about it also being in the bottom of a drawer. If someone's written something, how does anyone even know it's there if it's not lodged with a solicitor?
Well, I'll tell you what I would do. I would lodge it with a solicitor, free of charge. Well, the firm that I know doesn't charge.
Is that the one you work for?
Well, there's a good guess. How did you know? But I would certainly then give copies to the people that count.
Right.
I suppose my family's not exactly nuclear. I've got 3 daughters and they're nuclear, I can tell you. But they would each have a copy of the will, and I know where the original is, and so would they. And same goes for a lasting power of attorney, which is another whole different subject.
Yes, true. Yes. The trouble with the lasting power of attorney, though, is, well, in my particular case, I think I'm named for 2 different people, and in each case I've no idea what I've now done with the piece of paper that gave me the authority to be the attorney, power of attorney. So if I had to then wave it somewhere, I'd be thinking, oh no, what have I done with it?
Well, the good thing about a lasting power of attorney is there is only one original, and knowing where that is the important thing. So whoever is the donor, whoever's granted you the attorney, they should know. And really,
but then their whole point is that they lose their marbles.
Well, you need to find out before that then, Shan. If you agreed to be their attorney, you should know where the original of the document is.
Okay. I don't know why they chose me.
I'm telling you off there, sorry.
Well, no, because that's the whole point, isn't it? These people are saying, I trust you enough to look after my affairs if I can't look after my affairs myself.
Yes.
The least you can do is actually be capable to do that for them.
Yes, it's part of the agreement, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And I think, as Kevin said, you used the term their life-changing event. In the last 4 years, my daughter-in-law and daughter, respectively, have had 3 grandchildren. And of course, they didn't exist 4 years ago, and then, one is 4, one is 2, and the other one is 1. So that's 3 times in 4 years. There may have been a reason to change the actual structure of the will.
Yes,
and I think so. That's a very good piece of advice.
Case in point.
Indeed.
But it just the thing is, I won't stay on this much longer. But of course, it is money every time you do a change, and I think people need to weigh that up as well. What is the best thing?
But my argument, counter argument, would be, the cost of not doing it is even greater normally.
Yes, and the stress for the individual family members while they try to sort it all out.
Yeah, the emotion around it is.
Well, the thing you can do best of all, though, is spend everything you've got whilst you're alive.
I'm definitely going to be doing that.
I shouldn't have said that.
No, it's true.
Just don't tell my wife that.
That you laughed and agreed with him. Yeah. We won't tell her that. It wasn't my idea.
Yes.
So now on to parish news. We'll start with you, Steph. In your parish, which is
Denmead Parish Council.
What is going on?
Well, I think the headline that probably most Denmead parishioners would talk about is the proposed building of about 90 homes on a field at very near the centre of the village. We all recognise the need for obviously more homes. We've got just over 6,000 homes in Denmead now, yet we're still classified as a village. You'd argue that's bordering on town size. So you think, well, okay, it's another 90. What's another 90? But again, it's another field or fields that are going to be taken out of commission. But it's the infrastructure that's not there to cope with another, probably 200 and something people in 90 homes. It's the ratio of cars to homes is growing, but the flooding that we're already experiencing in that part of the village is already severe. And fair play to the council and the amenities. They've tried to alleviate the flooding, but it's still there. But we're now going to put another 90 dwellings on that already relatively saturated part of the village.
Well, surely the homes, they won't be able to live in them if they all get flooded.
Well, no, the planning application does talk about a upgrading of the sewerage and drainage systems. But I think people are nervous, particularly the residents of that road that will back onto it. They're nervous and they have no confidence that will actually alleviate, the additional issue that will come. But you're right. If there's flooding in the new estate, then people, when they're walking around to view, won't be interested in buying anyway.
And anyway, it's going to suck it all up into their houses, so it might solve the flooding for the other people.
Yes.
It's not the best plan, but it does seem a bit unusual, doesn't it?
It does. So that's the headline in Denmead. And the other thing we're looking to do is we're looking to actually take our greenfield sites within the village, roundabouts and our village green, and to actually make sure that we actually make the most of it with planting of flowers and planting of trees, and just trying to invest a bit more in those very delicate parts of the village as well. Yeah. So as you come through the village, you just get that great feel factor that Denmead is a great place to be.
Which is nice, because it does make a difference. I think certainly in Emsworth, I was filming there, I can't remember what event it was for, and I was early, and there was a little group of people suddenly launched themselves onto some flower baskets in their square, and they were all making them pretty, and as if the flowers had been there. You know, I shouldn't have wanted, I really wanted to laugh, because I was thinking, oh, in an hour's time, I'd have just thought, how lovely, they've been there all the time. But they kind of descended almost at dawn.
Vision of them launching themselves onto the... Wouldn't that hurt? I would have thought.
Yeah, but they were there with the trowels, and they were just literally, they were like that. And then suddenly there were all these blooms in place, which was amazing. Before we move to what's going on at Shedfield, I just wanted to ask, so you don't have any choice as a parish councillor as to whether those houses will be built or not then?
The parish council's remit is to comment and to raise through its own processes the planning application. Ultimately, planning is powers reserved to Winchester, and therefore the hierarchy up to obviously to the government. As I say, within the Denmead Village Plan, we have to find a space for 250 houses in the next 20 years, and this clearly would be about 40% of them in this one tranche, as it were. So we represent the villages where we can, and the trouble is when you can't change a decision, sometimes people say you haven't tried hard enough. I can promise you that the Denmead Parish Council is lobbying as hard as it can to make whatever development happens the best for the village. Okay. But a development will happen.
We'll see. So Shedfield, we'll start with Shedfield, and we may have to come back to Shedfield a bit later, but what's going on there with your parish council?
A similar story, actually. I guess our parishes are not similar in many respects, but I think in some they are. One particular aspect, and these, incidentally, my opinions are my own rather than the council's, but we have 250 new houses allocated to us over 20 years, but unfortunately, and I mean unfortunately, the developers think that should be 20 months. So we're under pressure right away to accommodate all these houses. There's no infrastructure in place, so we don't have a doctor's surgery. Don't know whether the school can accommodate. There's no dentist, no bus routes per se that will stand the extra population.
I'm going to have to stop you there. We will go back to that a bit later. If you've news, we should be talking about, contact us on our email, which is talk@thatsolent.com. talk@thatsolent.com.